my name is Augustine Colebrook. I'm the principal at Midwifery Wisdom Collective. My focus is on big picture political movements that are happening within the profession, some of the controversial questions, and centering voices that are not being regularly heard.
I'm Layla Wyatt. I am a traveling student midwife, learning midwifery from cultures and a lineage of midwifery throughout the United States. I'm here to center the voices of students to hear their calling, their pathway, why they chose midwifery, and even share a bunch of birth stories along the way.
Greetings, I'm Jamara Amani. I am a midwife, a mom, and a social justice activist. I am here to challenge white supremacy, homophobia, transphobia, and anything that keeps people from being their best and living their best selves, as we have the human right to do. And I am looking forward to sharing stories of birth justice on this podcast.
Hi there, I'm Delmar Bowden. I am non-binary, queer, transgender, Latinx, midwife, and full-spectrum doula. My focus is on increasing access and equity in midwifery care and midwifery education.
Hello, my name is Angie Love. I am a community nurse midwife in Vero Beach, Florida, at the practice of Midwife Love. I also do telehealth midwifery through Midwife RX. I'm a mama, and I am committed to maintaining birth choices for all people and educating a future generation of midwives, because we will not die out.
Laureli, thank you so much for agreeing to come on. I love your name. I want to know more about you. I'm hoping that you could just give us a little overview about obviously your career, your professional history, as well as the organization that you started and what that's all about, what you're doing right now.
Yeah. Oh gosh. And I'm if I come across as a little out there, I am exhausted. I was up most of the night. So
Oh my gosh.
you don't
Life of a midwife.
Exactly. You don't, not sure you can even form words because you're so tired, but yeah.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
You do, I'm sure. I am, I'm a nurse midwife based in Vermont. I started off though in the mid 80s as a direct entry midwife. This was long before CPMs, they didn't even exist. And so I went to a school in California that the person that was teaching it got arrested for teaching midwifery. You know, that's how far back it goes. And then I had an amazing internship. So that was my sort of foray into midwifery. And then, for a number of reasons that a lot of us do, wanted something different, needed something more sustainable with a family, not only financially, but just time-wise. And so I became an RN and had an amazing, wonderful experience doing that. And then finally pursued my CNM because that was always in the back of my head, but you get busy. And so I did that about 12 years ago. I finished that. Yeah. So that's how.
Wow. Well, so tell me about the organization that you've now started.
Yeah. So Midwife Pilgrim was started in 2015 during the Ebola crisis. It's sort of a response. There was a need that was discovered quickly among some of my husband. My husband was working in an Ebola unit, and he realized that these pregnant women or newly postpartum women were coming in, and it was just assumed that everything was Ebola, but living with a midwife, he realized, no, that isn't necessarily true. And he was very, very concerned. So he would often call me in the middle of the night and say, how should we be doing it differently? Sometimes the people he was working with were like, oh, that's a great idea, we will. And other times they weren't, but the director noticed and said, what are you doing? And so then they contacted me and we came up with some guidelines for them to help them sort of differentiate or kind of work together. It is sometimes hard to differentiate certain symptoms from other symptoms, but to make sure that that was considered or a big part of it, that, if you have a newly postpartum woman, they're going to be bleeding. If they're feverish, it may not be Ebola. There really could be something else that needs to be addressed, things of that nature. So that was and right then is when the earthquake in Nepal happened right around the same time. And so some friends of mine and I had already been talking about wanting to do more globally focused work, or, what were the needs? And then this sort of fell into my lap, and we all got together and said, yeah, let's start this. And it was also because too, we realized that it is a specialty work, as you know, and it's also very hard to get into. So if you are single with no children and have no expenses at all, sure, you can give 6 months to a year. If you have certain education levels, you're more, and with reason, I mean, because there's different offerings and different issues in different places, but, or if you had the money, if you could pay your way to go someplace and help, that's great. But most midwives that I know absolutely can't, we can't take time off from work to then pay for an experience. We may be able to take time off from work to cover our expenses, but then to pay on top of it, so things of that, or it was who you knew, if you had an in, and so that was sort of frustrating for us. And I think we strived originally to be more of that network, to be that who to say, okay, let's hook you up. Here's an NGO that needs this help. Here's a midwife that has these skills. How can we connect the two? And that is a big part of what our role is, sort of like a middleman, I guess, or a middlewoman, you can say. And
so do you have a pool of midwives that you call on? Is it people who've worked with you before? How does it work?
Right. So that's a good question. We have a large number of people who have gone through our registry process, and it's actually a very simple registry process, but it is something we feel strongly about. It has certain educational modalities on it that we require, totally free, but we require. And so once you kind of complete all of that, you're on our registry. And then, if something comes up, we may contact you and say, hey, this organization, or we'll pass on that information to certain organizations as they reach out to us. The interesting part is this has been going on for a number of years. And so a lot of the information we have is way outdated. We don't have email addresses for everybody, a lot of their, so I wish we had like a way to just put out a group thing, and we kind of do, but I'm going to be honest, it's we are not one of those big NGOs that makes a lot of money and hires people. There's literally not one paid person, myself included. Wow. So every bit of work that is done is strictly by volunteers. And so there's a point where like, no, I just can't, this is too much for me right now, or this is too much for them. Like, we can't do that. The pandemic also sort of halted everything anyways. So, and so we're in the process of actually refocusing what do we want to focus on? And we just had a meeting about that. And so that's going to be something we're looking at going into the future. This will still be part of it. Wow. I love the fact that some NGOs, some actually very large NGOs, reach out to us when they need midwives, and we'll say, do you know anybody? Can you get us somebody? At the same time, we're realizing that it is such a specialty work, and that a lot of people don't understand exactly what it is. It also varies from area to area. What may be needed in this situation is going to be very different than in this situation. And that education actually is the biggest part. A lot of midwives feel like, oh, well, I have this home birth background and I'll be great. And it's like, it's not that easy. And some people, it really is. And other people struggle, and that's okay. If they could be better prepared, they could serve better. And so we're looking into it.
So where has Midwife Pilgrim served in the past?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is one of those questions that when I'm going on no sleep, I'm gonna go on my computer. Hold on, and tell you.
That's totally okay.
Yeah, isn't that awful?
No, that's not awful. When you manage so much and you're sleep deprived, you sometimes just need a moment and a second brain. The computer's definitely my second brain.
Right. I know it's wonderful and terrible at the same time. So
Indeed.
I think Bangladesh was our biggest endeavor that we've done. We had a lot of support from the host organization there, Hope Foundation, and we sent a lot of midwives there, and we were there for a long time. There was a lot of education involved. Refugee work in Turkey and Greece. Haiti, we sent somebody to Haiti. In Nepal, we mainly did assessments, the curriculum development in Sierra Leone, things like that. Where else? Most of the work we've done has been more refugee work. So Greece, Turkey, there was another place. Oh, Lebanon, sorry. I knew there was someplace else. We've supported work in Iraq. Not so much sending volunteers as much as helping financial support when we could, though we would send volunteers if we could. And we also raised money in Beirut after the bombing there, things like that. And then we have some work in Kenya we're doing. We work with one clinic. We've been consistently working with them for a number of years, supporting them with education. And they let us go and watch them and learn from them, which is pretty wonderful. And then they also, in northern Kenya, one of the people that work at that clinic in Kenya started her own, or felt this drive to, out of her own experience as a young girl starting her periods and how she had to stop school, all of those things. So she has started to make hygiene kits for her village and that area. I know she's amazing. And so all the people that work at this clinic in Nairobi, it's in the second poorest neighborhood in Nairobi, and there it's phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And so so we're very proud of the work that she's been doing too, and we try to support them. So
that's awesome. Well, Laureli, have you personally been to any of these places, or are you just busy in the administrative place placing people?
Yeah. So I was the one that developed that curriculum in Sierra Leone. I did go to Nepal for an assessment just to see. It was right after the earthquake, and it was really good. I was able to do a lot of education at that point that you may not have been aware when it happened. It was pretty devastating to a lot of places and a lot of the villages. And they took these new grad nurses and gave them a 3-day course in maternity, and were putting them in these places. They were desperate. And so I spent some time with a group of these nurses, really, it was actually fun. They were very young and very new and terrified, and just drilling them. Okay, let's talk shoulder dystocia. Let's talk hemorrhage, and just kind of doing that and over and over and over to give them a sense so that they felt like they had it, that part. Going around and seeing what the other needs were. What was interesting about that is the international community really stepped up. And so a lot of supplies were not needed. And they actually, other than needing mentors, did not need midwives. And this is where we learned that we also have to be selective too, because you get a lot of people that want to catch babies. That is their goal. I want to go and catch babies. And we're like, no, we need you to step back and teach, but we need you to be hands-off unless there's a dire emergency. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I mean, not only is it better for their education of the local staff, but there's legal reasons and there's, sort of political reasons you have to take into account. And so that was also a new...
Absolutely. And not to mention like social justice reasons. Like I feel really passionately about this too, is that we need culturally matched care. People who look and sound like the people they're taking care of. It makes all the difference. And in fact, studies show that it ends up in safer outcomes too. I love that that's your focus. It's a huge focus of my work as well.
Awesome. So that was a very interesting aspect for me to learn, like, oh, okay, this is a part of it that I wasn't realizing would be, and so having to say, sorry, you don't make a registry. But so I was in Nepal. I was in Greece several times. And on a couple of the islands, very, very busy. And so that was an eye opener. And then I was the first one that went to Bangladesh, and that was right when the Rohingya had the mass exodus. So there were no other NGOs really there. I mean, the NGOs that were already in place from years before were there. And then Hope Foundation, that has a hospital right there, they stepped up. They were the only ones there at the time, other than some food organizations. Within a couple months, it had expanded, but it was huge. It was huge.
Wow.
The amount of work and the need. And I was so impressed with everything that everybody on the ground was trying to do, and how they were doing it. But it was also, we talk about in this work, I don't know if you're familiar with it, like there's always something that kind of breaks you. Like you feel like you're tough and you can handle it, and you have this sympathy and a lot of sadness and a lot of love and compassion, but there's something that just takes away. You're like, oh my gosh, is this a human race? Like, how can we as humans be this? And I think, like I have one friend, it was actually Hurricane Katrina, believe it or not, and working in New Orleans, that totally did it for her. And other people were, Lebanon, Iraq, and Bangladesh was for me, like, I just am still in shock at the stories I heard and witnessed and saw, and yeah. So, but
Wow.
we were able to help send a lot of people there, which was really good. And
It is good. Yeah.
was local,
Go ahead.
making sure local midwives, they were new grads, making sure they had the support they needed to do the work they did. Yeah. And education is
Yeah.
still a big focus of theirs.
Yeah. And the work continues, of course. Well, so I understand that your organization is now preparing for helping Ukraine. Can you tell me about what you're doing?
Yeah. So we got a request that some groups were going in and wanting to focus on sexual and reproductive health, which is really important, and reach out to us. So we actually have gotten those needs covered. We don't know what the future is going to be. And the reality is and this was border work. So Poland, I can't even think of Moldova, the border countries. And there are a lot of very small NGOs working within those areas as well. I wish I had contact with them, because those are the ones that need to know, wait, you need sexual reproductive health. And that's another big part of our focus, is making sure, like we did with that initial one in Sierra Leone during Ebola, you have to look at the whole picture. You can't just have people come in and say, okay, we're going to look at this, especially when you have a huge population of women showing up. And you don't have people that understand that kind of focus. You're going to miss a lot of things. You're going to not know the questions to ask. And we've seen stories. We've had stories, not so much in Ukraine, but in Haiti, even, and in Greece, of physicians that, just, like, for example, this 32-week pregnant woman who, with severe hypertension, who told her it was just stress and sent her home. It's like, you just want to, no, why would you do that? Things like that. So trying to, or women with UTI symptoms, it's like, you have to know that, okay, you don't have a lab here. So yeah, you're going to treat it. And how are you going to treat it? And how are you going to help them? And I do see in the last few years, I think because of a lot of media and social media type of things, gender-based violence has been a huge focus, which is really good. But gender-based violence is one part of sexual and reproductive health, and they need to incorporate the whole thing. So I see these NGOs saying, oh, and we do GBV, and it's like, yeah, but what about the rest? So we try to advocate whenever we can. We try to mention it. And that's actually a lot of our work in Greece and Turkey was, reaching out or finding these organizations, or being there, seeing these organizations and saying, hey, and they're like, oh my gosh, yes, please, and then starting to, develop relationships with them over that. So that's a big part of what we try to do to advocate for that. Unfortunately,
Wow.
It's still, the one piece that's missing with women's health.
Yeah. Well, so tell us a story. Tell us a story about somewhere where you've been or helped place someone of kind of the realities of humanitarian aid work from a midwifery perspective here. Like, what do you remember most about your last trip, or what's a memorable birth story you remember?
What do I remember? I mean, I could speak more about my own memories than other people's memories.
Yeah, tell me.
So, though I have some interesting stories that show what some of the things that, well, the story I want to share first is one to explain what it takes to do this work, and it's not my story. And this is a midwife who was recruited to go to Bangladesh, and had said that she had a lot of experience in other countries and understood that sometimes you don't have a translator, but that's not a problem. She's used to that, all of that, right? And my thought is, needs are needs. Yes, we have a specialty, and our specialty, is midwifery or GYN or, some aspect of that. But when there is a need, you don't just say, "Oh, that's not my job." I would hope we don't have that kind of. I consider it a kind of arrogance. And I get a call, and this was the only bad experience that I had. Well, no, I had several, but the only first real negative experience was sending a midwife. She, because all of the other experiences sending midwives anywhere were just. One midwife on HEOS who realized the biggest issue was hygiene, and she raised funds for a porta potty and a washing station for people, when they got off the boats. It's things that are important. And she called me really angry because she was bored. Now, she is in a refugee camp with 1 million people. There is no way you can be bored in a refugee camp with 1 million people unless you have your eyes closed and you're sitting there. And her complaint was that all of the local midwives were taking care of the women, and she didn't feel like she had anything to do. And I was like, you need to leave. I need to get you out of there, because you have no business being there. There is so much to do, whether it is holding somebody's hand or playing with children so that the mom can get a break, or going around and seeing, is anybody hungry? The food lines were so big, not everybody could stand in them. And if they missed it, they missed it. There's no reason to ever be bored in this work, whatever it is. So, kind of.
Wow, that's so intense. And entitlement is everywhere, but when it's really on display, it's so hard to see, right? Oh.
But it also was a good lesson for us, because it made us, when we do our interviews, it was another part of the question, or in our interview process, the questions that we would ask, do you realize that you may be sweeping floors or cleaning toilets or digging a latrine? Oh, I have no idea. But if you're there to serve, you're there to serve. And if that's something that you're not willing to do, then maybe this isn't quite where you should be. And not judge them on that, just because I want them to be able to look deep inside themselves and say, you know what? No, I can't do this. And then back out on their own. And that's okay. Yeah. And, it's better to be able to do that, but that's a hard thing to do. So there was that. That was one story. But the other stories around that is one of our midwives who had no experience anywhere at all. And I was actually more nervous about her because she was nervous and didn't know if she could hack it. Gosh, total rock star, and went, and she organized all of these funding and got these solar panels set up for these tents so that they would have further electricity and things, so totally different types of
Wow.
experiences there.
Wow.
But yeah,
humanitarian work is so extensive. It's not just medical, it's social and socioeconomic and environmental and mental and conscious and spiritual, everything is involved. Wow.
Everything. And sometimes it's literally just sitting down with somebody and having a cup of tea with them, because they are alone, and just, even if you don't speak the language, it's helping them to feel safe that they're not alone. It's helping you to develop a relationship so that you're more welcome and that you can offer more, it's everything. So It's
Wow.
that. But
Wow.
some of this work is boring. It's most of it is GYN. It is not catching babies. In the areas where it is catching babies, with few exceptions, it should be teaching and mentoring, as well as, and I think that doesn't mean you're not hands-on too, because sometimes that's what they need. They need to have you show them how to somersault a baby so you're not clamping and cutting every, things like that. And like, oh no, we're not going to do an episiotomy. We are going to, let me show you how to, do this. So that's a big part of it, right? But a lot of it is reproductive health in general. So GYN. And that's where it gets hard, because if you don't have that experience, you need to, how do I say this? You know how you don't know what you don't know? So if you don't realize you're missing something, it's like that doc in Haiti who's like, oh, it's just stress. So if you don't know that you're missing something, you're just not going to realize that. But so like knowing, your basic GYN, we have everybody go through the MISP. Are you familiar with that? It's Augustine, you got to look at this. It's the minimal initial service package for crisis situations, and it's the standard of care globally for crisis and disaster situations for sexual and reproductive health. So,
and who creates this?
Well, it's the IAWG, that I'll send you the link. They're a group of a whole bunch of different organizations, governmental and non-governmental, who came up with this years ago. And I've seeing it in action is very impressive. It can be a little bit overwhelming as you're going through the training program, but when you actually see it and work, you're like, whoa, it works. So it's what medications are needed for this, because let's face it, especially sadly, sexual assault is huge. So you need to know, how are we going to treat sexual assaults? What do we order? How do we order? How do we assess people for these sorts of situations? Who is in charge? Making sure somebody is in charge of that. So I saw it really in play in Nepal and in Bangladesh, and it works. It really works. But so, just sort of starting with that, but then expanding from there to whether it's UTIs, skin conditions are huge. As you can imagine, in refugee situations, people living together in close quarters, parasites are going to be huge too. You just got to learn how to be able to recognize it and how to treat it. Things of that. And even if you don't have prescription privileges yourself, but there's somebody nearby, you can be a huge help if you can be the one to say, okay, this is that, let's get it, and be that triage person for that to make things go.
Amazing. So tell me about a scene, either GYN or OB, that you had when you were serving in the field, as it were.
Oh, I mean, you get a lot of UTIs. And that makes sense too, because there's no place to go to the bathroom, especially in a lot of cultures. You're certainly not going to just go anywhere. There's a lot more modesty involved, and they feel a little more self-conscious. So you hold everything in, more UTIs, things of that nature. I have horror stories of, I think the
you can share.
Yeah, I'm trying to say this, the hardest story I ever had, and this was one we couldn't treat, or, for a variety of reasons. And I still kind of have like nightmares and wonder and worry, but this was a 13-year-old girl who had been gang raped. And then they got out with her family. Now she became pregnant. And what's interesting in her culture was, if you're pregnant, it's your fault. So you're to blame. If you're raped, you're now the one who's struggling. So she did not want to be pregnant at all, but she was in a place where it was too late to offer her any treatment to terminate the pregnancy at that point. And her parents also did not want her to terminate the pregnancy. But she was absolutely desperate. And there was really little we could do legally because of where we were at with her. And she was, hoping that her parents were trying to find someone who was willing to marry her right then. But she also physically she was very, very, she wasn't physically mature enough to give birth. Like, I'm not sure how any of this worked or helped, and the whole thing still just breaks my heart because I wish we had more options for her. This is another part, I think we also have to look at our own moral aspects around safe abortion care. So whether it is, if we're against it, that is fine. That's your own personal. But if you're in a situation where somebody is asking you for this care, and this is part of the MISP, you either have to be willing to provide it or have somebody nearby who's willing to provide it, because that is a service that is really vitally important. And had we been anywhere else, there were more options for her that we could have offered her. And we just were not able to. I worried for her mental health. I actually felt she was suicidal and was very, very worried about her. And I have no idea whatever happened to her.
It's so hard.
It is hard. And a lot of people also are this idea, well, once you meet the baby, you bond. No, it doesn't work that way. It absolutely
Not always. Yeah.
You can't count on that. And if anything, especially and if she ends up with a traumatic delivery because her pelvis isn't quite, like, who knows? Like, yeah, it could be so that was one really hard story. But I've also been in places where when I go places, I bring everything that I can, like I just bags of whether it's antibiotics, Peridium to help for UTI symptoms, because let's face it, they're miserable. You don't want to suffer through that. I also bring pregnancy tests, things like that. And there was one couple, newly married, and they were just landed on one of the islands of Greece. And I was able to tell them they were pregnant, and they were so happy because they had literally just lost everything. They were fleeing from Syria. But and then ended up in Turkey and made it there. But they felt like that was a sign that they were doing the right thing, and they were, that there was hope now, even though they didn't even know where they were going to go. And it was just this really sweet moment, to be able to offer them this hope, So
I think many of us can picture clients on our exam tables or on birth room beds, hearing the heartbeat for the first time, and that joy that washes over a couple. You could be anywhere in the world and sharing that hope and that wonder.
Right.
Even a refugee camp could have that moment. That's really beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely. Another interesting story I had, remember I said Bangladesh is the one. I think I have more. That was also my most recent big trip. So I think that's why also, there are a lot of women that were very flat, and I probably will start crying. Okay. And you would see them and they were lovely, and it was, but there was this flatness to them. They were broken, absolutely broken. And
like a flat affect.
A flat affect. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Then you would hear their stories and you just would be like, how can anybody have survived what they went through? Like, it was unreal, the atrocities that were occurring. But one woman came to the clinic and she shared this story of, all of her children, she had sons, and her husbands, the whole village, they were forced outside, and then she and her daughters were raped in front of them, and then they forced them to watch them execute her whole family. Right? Right. How do you even get through that? Right. But what was, sorry, she started wailing, crying. And I think we sat there for an hour just sobbing and sobbing. And I think she was the one I had the most hope for. Like, she, you know what I mean? Like, I felt like she wasn't
could let it out of her body.
She could let it out of her body. Yeah. Sorry. As you these kind of stories are hard. And that's, that was one area, but Bangladesh, you heard, not Bangladesh, like Greece, you didn't necessarily hear those kind of atrocities, but these people that lost everything and lost their families and their husbands and this, all of it is senseless. And, I'm, looking at Ukraine now, and it's senseless, all of it. And I just, my heart breaks for everybody, not only the Ukrainians, but I also have a lot of sympathy for the Russian soldiers who have been brainwashed and are young and have no clue. And, it's just, all of it is beyond understanding.
Well, when it's a natural disaster, there's some part of us that can go like, this is the nature of this planet we live on, right? Like,
right. Right.
But when it's human on human violence, it is so senseless. It's so hard to make any. Yeah.
Can I just message him quickly? Do you mind?
Of course.
Sorry, because so as you know, he is in Ukraine right now, and
get any update you can and come back.
Yeah, I'm getting an update. I've been up. Yes. Okay. So he unfortunately
is a midwife who works full time.
Well, and now, he's been in Kyiv, and his team's been doing interesting work up in Irpin. But now they're actually heading east, and I'm a little worried. So,
Can you tell me what is his specialty?
He's an ER nurse, paramedic. So he's doing ambulance work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, triage. Trauma.
And he's with what organization?
Go Docs, Global Outreach Doctors. Yeah, but they've hooked up with a Ukrainian organization there that we actually can't quite translate. None of our translators will work. I can get it as close as Humanity Help, but yeah. And so they're doing amazing work, and it's a huge organization. Very clearly have a lot of influence within Ukraine. The amount of money that seems to be flying around is astounding. So, yeah.
So does he tell you anything about what it's like in Kiev?
He says it's eerily quiet. It's just a strange. There's this curfew and everything is totally quiet. And then during the day, very few people are out. He was more central. It's the suburbs that have been really hit hard. And so that's where they went 2 days ago, because they were able to get in with some food and medical treatment and stuff. But and now Russia has backed off. So Ukraine has totally taken over. But you may have heard what they left behind, like the horrible things that were left behind in Irpin and Busha and stuff like that. So they went up in that area just 2 days ago.
And does Midwife Pilgrim plan to go into Ukraine at all, or not at this point?
No. So remember, we don't really go in. We just
support other organizations.
We support other organizations, with a few exceptions. Like we do go into Kenya, maybe because they've asked us to be in that role. But we right now, it's not. They don't really want people to come in just to go, the hospitals still are staffed. So one of the questions you had emailed me about is what have I heard? And I haven't heard a lot, but you do hear more and more, and so the hospitals are still running. I think everybody is exhausted, but it seems like the staff has all stayed to make sure that the care is still there, even if they are moving to a different building or underground or wherever they're going. Some places are able to, especially within Kyiv, they're able to get equipment and supplies in. Other places, not so much. And that's where it gets really hard when you think about like Mariupol, it's obviously tragic, and Kharkiv and things like that. I have been hearing that I don't know if you read the article, that it seems to be a lot more preterm deliveries, which kind of makes sense from a stress level. So,
it sure does.
Yeah, things of that nature. And, but unless there was somebody said, listen, we are here and we really need help and we're safe. I also, because I don't want to be part of that security measure, because we wouldn't even know how. It has to be safe for people. before I personally would step in as.
Are you in touch with any midwives in that region? Do you know? I mean, I don't think home birth was happening before. Is it happening now?
So Katya, remember the midwife that we were emailing back and forth? She is. I mean, so she is in touch with people, but I haven't heard back from her how or what.
Yeah.
So I don't know no more. I mean, I've gotten a few. So I have another friend that used to live in Ukraine, and she was in touch with a lactation consultant there who works in a place, and so she sent me some updates from her, things of that nature. And it sounds like a lot of their work, especially at the beginning when areas were getting attacked, were less lactation and more just general, working on wound care, things of that nature. Stuff like that. But the women were still getting the help they needed. They were still delivering. And obviously breastfeeding in any of these kind of situations is going to be paramount. That is encouraged. So especially among women that may have been considering not breastfeeding before, it's really being pushed now.
Yeah,
That's
definitely.
the thing that it's hard to teach women. So not teach women, but to explain to midwives that that for a lot of refugees that are coming in, they may be 6 months, their children may be 18 months. Like, we have no idea. But if they weren't breastfeeding, they're not going to relactate. That's not an option. So we have to understand how to help support them. But there's this idea that, they'll just relactate or somebody else can feed the baby. But if you're feeding your own baby and you don't have enough food supply and you don't have enough water, you're not going to be able to feed other babies too. And so it can get very complicated. And, the good news is that all the babies being born now are being, 100% encouraged to breastfeed as, much as possible to ensure that adequate milk supply. But prior to that, if it hadn't happened, it is more tricky. And this is a culture too that, it's these are big, huge cities. I mean, of millions of people, and it's sort of that trend here. We have, I would think we'd have a much higher breastfeeding rate than we do, and it's the same everywhere in the world, especially with
there's partly a marketing of, there's partly this marketing of breastfeeding, breast milk substitutes, and then the convenience factor, and then, women in the workforce, and, there's a lot of reasons.
Absolutely. And so it's, so that's one of the things that has been happening. But she said that they're really working hard on making sure that everybody's getting the support, and, and just keep waiting for the various supplies and resources to arrive as needed. And like I said, you can get into Kyiv, though I think they were trying to shut it down. Some of the roads were becoming unsafe, but there's still ways of getting in there. And then, from there, but getting it to the other places, that's going to be the tricky part. So,
Well, so earlier in our conversation, you mentioned that when you're in one of these disaster zones or, refugee camps, that every midwife kind of has their breaking point. They see something, they hear something, and they just kind of are like, what is this world? What even is humanity? What am I doing? That kind of thing. You've obviously faced this yourself, and you face this counseling folks in your network who you send out and I'm sure receive back. How do you counsel them? How do you deal with that kind of reality?
It's an interesting thing. I mean, we try to have debriefings after, but like most midwives, when they get back from any type of deployment that they've done, they hop right into family and work again, and so it's like, you're busy. Hopefully we try to have people, if situations arise that are really difficult to deal with mentally or even physically, that we can be there for support, like a WhatsApp phone call away, or and whatever organization they're with, making sure that they have that kind of supportive, understanding as well. I also encourage volunteers and this is hard when it is really busy, and I can't say that I would necessarily be able to do it myself, but I do encourage, depending on where you are, to take a day or two off, like if you, and just relax, go sightsee, go see the community you're working with in a way from a tourist perspective, like do something totally outside that is so different than what you're doing now, to gain a little bit of perspective that this is not all there is. Again, there is a whole other world. It's not all this trauma. And sometimes that's easier to do emotionally, and other times it's harder to do emotionally because then it makes it even worse, but I think it's important to realize, okay, this is one thing that's happening and it's absolutely unacceptable, but that is not the whole world, and if you can step away, whatever that takes to step away for a day or two, I think it can be vital for yourself and for those you serve. You need to be able to get that break. Plus there's a physical exhaustion that happens, and we all know that mistakes are made more when you're really, really tired, and we want to avoid that. The other thing is learning, there's a lot of guilt. I think, why and how we all get into this work, it's different for everybody. But I think there is a part of us that just feels, for many of us, that we have so much. What can we do to offer more for those that don't? And it's our way of trying to offer a little equity into this very, big world of inequalities. And so sometimes that is accompanied by guilt. Sometimes it's accompanied by feelings of, just immense sadness. So, sometimes there's a lot of anger involved. And so learning how to, I think there's a part that everybody has to come to, that, okay, it's true. I was born into this world who I am. And you know what? That is so lucky. That is absolute luck. And it's okay. There's no shame in who I was born into being. I can be fully who I am and be okay with that. And then the next step, though, is, so what can I give back? And learning how to do that, I think, is really important.
Yeah, when you face those kinds of atrocities or challenges in your own life, or seeing the suffering of others, that practice of gratitude is really one of the most healing things. Yeah.
And it's not that different in the US. There's a lot of sexual violence here. There's a lot of, gender-based violence. There's a lot of, very disrespectful care and health inequities, even within our so-called amazing country, right? So we can certainly even see it within our own communities. So, yeah. So I think, and I do feel like it's an important
go ahead.
value.
Go ahead.
Oh no, it's like an important value, and one I've always tried to, even with my children. It's like, I don't, the story of Miss Rumphius, the Lupin lady.
Yes, she's my favorite book ever.
Yeah,
I am living her life. I have patterned my life after that children's book.
Well, you and me both, except I don't have my house by the sea yet. And
I don't have my house by the sea yet either, because we're not crones yet. We're still in this work phase, right? But that's where I'm headed towards. Maybe our houses can be nearby. I'll wave at you.
There you go. But I do feel like we have to make the world a more beautiful place. And for some people, it's planting lupins. And for other people, it's doing this work. And, and we all have to find what it is that does that. And I think it's a really important, gosh, if everybody lived like that, can you imagine the world,
Amen. Aho. All of the things.
Yeah.
Well, so in all of your travels and all of your outreach and advocacy work and training other midwives, what have you learned that you want to share with the general midwifery population? What do we wish they knew that you have found?
I think that we need to, that's a good question. There's so many. I think, and this is partly why we just had the meeting the other day of what is Pilgrim's focus going to be? Because I do want to encourage this work, obviously, but I also want to encourage the preparation for the work and the training for the work, and that first, there are so many different ways of doing it, just like there's so many paths to midwifery, but that you have to be willing and able, before you even jump in, to start doing the research, because if you just jump in thinking, oh, I'm just going to catch babies, you're not going to be of good service for anybody. There's so much more involved. And so, and at least we have the internet now and Google, right? You can start. I know Mercy in Action has an amazing educational program for people that want to do global low resource work. But we're thinking of creating one, maybe. I mean, we have a board of directors that is amazing, but we're busy, and so we as a business, we're terrible, but as a vision, I think we're amazing. So that's
amazing. Well, I think Christine Laurie, right?
Yes, she's incredible. Yeah,
she's incredible. Well, she has just created a CEU course for how to be a traveling midwife on our platform. I'd love to share it with you.
I would love to see that too. Yeah. And then, and we have other things, like I'm a big helping babies survive, helping mothers survive. Like, I feel like you should not do this work but if you do this work, it will change everything for you if you're in intrapartum care. But even if you're a midwife in the US, it will. I mean, I'm a midwife in the US, hospital-based, home birth-based, and this stuff comes in handy. But also focusing on the GYN aspect, focusing on the tropical medicine aspect, malaria, tuberculosis, Zika.
We're about to release that course too, tropical illnesses for midwives. So you're going to have a good resource from Christine.
Maybe when I should have met, I should talk to Christine more. Because this is stuff we've been doing all along. We just haven't actually organized it. We do it when we do our mentorship program, things like that.
Of course, you would have to, before they leave.
And we want, we want something that are more, good. I'm glad it's out there.
I'll send you links. She intended it to be not only for individuals, but also for organizations to use it as primer. So we've got you
awesome.
Good access
and I love the Global Health Media Project, obviously. It's
an amazing project for sure.
That's Vermont-based project too. They're
cool.
Yeah,
love that.
Then, and then other things too. I love I want to more focus too on my brain, the VIA, the inspection with acetic acid for PAPs, sort of that, and with different various treatment options, things of that nature that also can be of a great service in certain areas. And, and I'm sure Christine knows, but yes, we have had midwives, myself included, who have put IUDs on dirt floors in a tent. How do we get people to understand sterility and safe, but that you really can do it without stirrups and, all these lights and this, things like that.
Yeah, I love that. Midwives are such can-do kind of folks. I just really love that. Well, so how can people find and follow you online?
Well, we're at midwifepilgrim.org. We are a terrible, mainly because some of us are just older and we don't understand Instagram and this Twitter thing and all of that stuff. So even though I think we have accounts, I don't access them. And we were realizing the other day that our Facebook presence is very sporadic. Though, we are all on Facebook, but it is kind of sporadic. So we're trying to figure that out. And it's interesting, word of mouth. So our going to Nepal they had heard of us. We were brand new, and yet they had heard of us and asked us to come to Nepal. And so I do think there is mouth that is happening. That is, slowly over. I think it's been 7 years now or 6 years that we've been doing this. Though the last 2 is such a blur.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, so if somebody wanted to come work with you, it would be in a volunteer capacity, because all of the people you work with are volunteers. It sounds like you could use a social media manager. What else?
We could use a fundraiser. So we have tried to hire someone to do grant writing for us, but just take a percentage of the take. We don't have the funds to just, and everybody that seems to have said, yes, I'm going to do it. And then we never hear from them again. So yeah, those are the sort of things. And but first we need to really focus on our mission again. We're really looking at that and what we're going to be doing. how we want to go forward, things like that. We were, some of our programs were like, we got ACNM CEUs, and they just changed their whole format, which is incredibly frustrating. I know. So are you getting them
incredibly frustrating? No, we cannot. We are not a nonprofit.
Okay, let's talk. We are a nonprofit.
Okay,
So
let's talk.
Let's talk. But we just
I'm so frustrated by that. I don't know who made that judgment call or what they thought they were accomplishing by
right. And I'm an ACNM member.
Yeah.
But we are an nonprofit, and we have, I mean, I've done a lot of work over the years to get some of our programs to get the CEUs. But we don't have the money.
Well, I have a project manager who does all of that. So let's talk, because we could help each other out somehow.
Absolutely, because our work clearly is the same. And
yeah, out there helping the people.
Well,
so I'm just so happy to talk with you. I'm so happy to put forward your mission, what you're doing out in the world, make people more aware using our platforms. And I guess what really occurred to me while you were speaking and hearing those stories is the quote from the Talmud. And I'm just going to read it because I think it's so fascinating, right? Don't be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now, love mercily now, walk humbly now. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. And that just says everything of what you're doing. And it's an honor. It's an honor to get to know you. It's an honor to put your mission forward. Thank you for sharing your heart with us tonight.
Well, thank you.
Today. Yeah.
This morning here, but where are you?
Morning.
You're in India?
I live in the central part of southern India. Yeah.
Wow, amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I've only been to India once, and it was incredibly humbling. And
it's an amazing place. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Laureli, I hope we stay in touch. I hope we have other ways that our paths can pass and connect and all that.
I was going to talk to Christine about this workshop. We were hoping once the pandemic is totally done, whenever that'll be, like we wanted to set up a workshop, and I was going to say, Christine, let's do this. So, but now, yeah. But
well, Laureli, can I tell you a little bit about our conference in November so you can share with your folks if you're at all interested?
Oh, please do send it, and I can post it around.
Awesome. So the Midwifery Wisdom Collective, which is my organization, is hosting our first conference in November in Galveston, Texas. And we have 30 speakers, some of the most experienced midwives in the nation, including Christine Loring, who will be talking on travel midwifery.
Awesome. That is so great.
I'll send you more info.
Please do. Yeah, and I'm happy to spread the word.
Thank you so much.
Great.
It was an honor to meet you and talk to you.
It's an honor to meet you, and you take care. And I have no doubt our paths will cross again very soon.
I hope so.
Okay, take care.
Bye, my friend. Bye-bye.